So it is an honor to be here with all of you and having this conversation, because the work of DEI, the work that we do and we're so passionate about, the work that is essentially the underpinning of every industry that is a business essential, is all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what I call the human connection business. Before we get started, I want each of you just to introduce yourselves really quickly. Tell us something you're passionate about as it relates to DEI, and then we'll get the conversation going.
All right, I'll kick it off. My name is Deveraux Lawson. I am the co-founder of Valerie, the agency, and the head of culture and marketing, and my passion is culture and community. And we'll get into it.
Hello, everybody. I wish I could see you. The
lights are so
I can't see anyone but this first row right here. So you're all gonna have to keep us very excited and hype. You have a job right here because we really can't see. But I'm Channing Martin, Chief Diversity and Social Impact Officer at Interpublic. Thank you. Woo! I love that. I am passionate about all of this work, the good, the bad, and everything in between. But I think what most excites me is the work that we do in this business every day and the ability to impact human behavior, both consciously and subconsciously.
Hi, I'm Tope Ajala. I'm the global head of DE&I at Ogilvy. Shout out to all the Ogilvy people in the room. What excites me in this space, I think it's the unseen, and it's the heroes, the unsung heroes that do the work every single day for the impact and the economic progression that we see in the world. So that's what excites me and keeps me going.
Excellent. So a round of applause for these ladies all at once. Yeah. So a part of what we're talking about right now is the state of DEI. And if you believe the hype, which we have said don't believe the hype, because what?
DEI will never die.
Y'all are good, but just real slow. DEI will never die. But you got to be more passionate about it. But the reality is, and I always talk about this, there's like an organized lie is stronger than a disorganized truth. And as we talk about DEI, there's a disorganized truth or a disorganized lie or organized lie that's happening right now. And we need to set the record straight and get some truth about what DEI, the state of DEI in the US, the state of DEI globally and what that means. And right now in the US in particular, they're saying it's dying, but we know differently. Tell me in your own words, why will DEI never die? You'll start with you guys since you're here.
Okay.
This is for all the panelists right now.
Great. So for me, in the context of DEI never dying, when you are physically in a space where people have their differences, those differences are always going to be discussed. They are always going to be made apparent. And for that reason, if there's a difference, we're having a conversation. And so I understand the context of like, oh, the implementation of it in the corporate space or the larger, someone's called it the business within a business, and that part is dying. When you look at DEI as just a conversation, sure, there might just be an argument there. But when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in the context of how you do business, how you live, how you exchange and engage with other people, it's impossible for it to die. And I think that that's the part that we need to focus on in terms of what we prioritize and how we push forward.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I agree with all of that. I think what's interesting, we live in a time where we tend to really forget history and like what comes before us, because this work isn't new. I'll meet people sometimes and they're like, oh wow, DEI is really hot right now, or this is like a new space. I'm like, it's not. And Dr. Sesha Moon said at a conference earlier this year, she said that we often talk about this work kind of starting, maybe in the 80s around, trying not to get sued. And employee relations and employment law, but it really started at Reconstruction. We live in a country, if you live here in the United States, that has created laws, whether they were affirmative or corrective or reparative, to right wrongs, right, in the name of justice, even if they weren't called social justice. So if we think about any laws that were to respond to Jim Crow, any laws that were to protect people in their right to access healthy foods, to water, to fair workers' rights, labor laws, et cetera. All of these are DEI laws, policies, and principles. This work isn't new. And like any other operating discipline, it will evolve, and it's going to continue to evolve. So the work is never going to go away. We have just come into a time where, we are attracted to hype. And so there are very few loud, effective voices that are making us think that this work is dying, but it's not. And many of you in this room are doing this work every day, even if you don't even hold the same title that we do.
And I can't agree more. I think, we've progressed, but we've also regressed. And I think what we're seeing now in this era of, is D&I dead? Well, let's look at the companies who are doubling down and investing in D&I. They're the ones who are making money. So as businesses start realizing that they can unlock potential by investing in D&I, they're not going to kill it either. They might rebrand it, repackage it, and do different things, but they understand the economic impact on investing in diverse voices, diverse perspectives, and diverse people. Right? And I think, the notion that D&I is dying or it's going to die, it's only serving a specific group of people, and we know who that is, and we know why that is. But as soon as money's brought back into the forefront, it's going to shift again.
I love everything that each one of you said. And if we think about this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we understand there's a relationship with the D for the diversity, the E for equity, the I for inclusion, there's a B for belonging. But again, it's really about the human connection business and how we are managing to take care of one another, because we make up the business. The humans make up the underpinning of any organization. Tope, we're going to go back to you. And there's a secret sauce that you like to talk about that really is a critical part of what makes it work for an organization. Give us more detail about what you identify as the secret sauce of DEI.
Ooh. It's about to come from the heart. I think, we talk about this often. The secret sauce for me within the work that we do is tenacity, right? And it's not the classic tenacity that, she's a strong Black woman. No, I am not, thank you. It's the tenacity that we know that the work is impactful and it's going to change lives. And it's the fact that us on the stage and everyone in this room, that every single day the work you do is meaningful. So imagine being in this bubble where you know that meaningful work is changing the world and it's adding impact. That is the tenacity that's needed, and that is the secret sauce. And the second secret sauce I say to everyone is become best friends with your finance partners, right? Money rules the world, and that doesn't mean, that's the same for in your organization, right? Your finance partners, they want to be involved, they want to invest, they want to understand what's going on, but you also have to give them the understanding of where their financial dollars go, right? If they know that the money that they are spending is going to come back to the business tenfold, right, through impact, then they're always going to invest. Everyone jokes and says, no one says no to Tope. I think finance doesn't say no to Tope, right? But again, it's all about tying things into economic impact and the long-term vision of success that they're going to get versus a social corporate responsibility. No, this is a business imperative, right? So make it a business imperative, it becomes finance's biggest number one priority.
Well, I think that's all said well and done, but the reality is right now, folks are cutting DEI dollars. Right?
Also true.
All of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, our head is on a swivel because we never know at what point and what day they're going to pull the dollars and pull the roll. So if we think about the downsizing that's happening in this DEI space, in this work that we're doing, how are you managing, and what is there a benefit, or what? Talk more about the downsizing and the if it's a financial imperative. Can you say, what's up with that? Why are they downsizing these roles? I'll start with you, Shannon, because you're looking dead at me.
Well, because when you said, I told my boss, if you are going to fire me, please let me know. I would like to know in advance.
Can I get a heads up?
Okay, can I get a heads up? I want to understand, is this as important as you say it is? And I think that we, as leaders, we should ask those questions. So I ask those questions. And so hopefully they're telling me the truth, but that's also been, I think, evidenced in the way that the work has been prioritized. And I would say in this environment, many heads are in swivels, not just in the DEI space. Many budgets have been slashed, not just in the DEI space. So I think anyone in any discipline, has to be very mindful of that, very demure, okay? About how you operate in your business, right? So if everyone should be wearing the hat of the CEO in their role, no matter what role that you're on. At any time of financial constraint or challenge or shift in a business, you have to operate with operational excellence and efficiency. And again, have partners like those in finance. I would agree with you on that for sure. And I think I would add a secret ingredient to your sauce, Tope, around engagement with people that don't look like you in this space. It is very difficult to cut a department or a person or a thing that is engaged across multiple stakeholders, people of power and influence, that is embedded in the business, and that is well supported. And even in doing all of those things, sometimes it may get cut. And I think in that case, when that happens, then you know that that organization or that leader or that department was never committed to this work in the first place.
Please, go ahead. Your hand is raised.
So coming from someone who's actually been there, and y'all can check my LinkedIn just to see what that looks like. I think it is actually, like there's two things that happen, right, when we're talking about DEI. It's one thing to say that a business doesn't see value and so therefore they make cuts and they pull things. There's another thing to discuss, and that's the change management aspect of it. And the challenge with diversity, equity, and inclusion work is that we're not calling it what it is, which is change management. We're changing the way people think about the culture of the business. We're talking about changing process. We're talking about where we change investment. And oftentimes, whether you are committed to it or not, when your values come face to face and there's tension, that also starts to push people away from the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The work that we do, or that I did, I have evolved and transitioned in my work, but the work that you do as an inclusion amplifier or evangelist, or however you want to identify yourself, is really committed to making change, not just for yourself, but for the people coming behind you. And that means going toe-to-toe with an industry, not just a business, not just one holding company, an entire industry and an entire culture and an entire world who have functioned in the same way for generations. And you as one person coming in here and telling people who don't necessarily even look at your job as a function like finance, or look at your job like a function like even in HR, or even creative, or even media. People are going to ask you constantly, why are you here? You are saying things that are invalidating everything I know. You are saying things that make me feel foolish. You're saying things that make me feel like an ist, whatever your ist or ism is. You're saying all of these things that make me uncomfortable. So it's not just about it being ineffective, why it gets cut. It also gets cut because it does reflect a mirror of the organization and the individuals that you have to engage with who are in charge of making change. And too much change can make people feel like they're not doing their job. And that comes into question when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is why, to Channing's point, to Tope's point, it's not just about being in the role. It's about how do you make that influence in your day-to-day job, no matter where you sit in the organization. Because as an inclusion leader, you can't do it yourself. They can get rid of you at any moment. You could literally be coming from a funeral. I will say that from experience.
Kai.
Okay? You can literally be coming for a funeral, and it could be your turn. And does that work stop because you're no longer with that organization? Obviously not. The work continues, the marathon continues, and that's what it's supposed to be about.
Love that.
If we think about how we redefine and how we reshape sort of this meaning about DEI and the work that we do, the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officers, Impact Officers, whatever you want to call them, there was this buzz about DEI hires. Now, my thought is that based off of what we talked about, I would say, hello, my name is Adrianne C. Smith, and I am a DEI hire. Now, let me tell you why I say that, because based off of what each one of you said, the type of work that you have to do, you have to know the financial bottom lines. You have to be concerned about the people and structure of the organization, the people who make up the organization. You have to be fully focused on those bottom line projection areas of an organization and how we all operate. So essentially, a CEO should be a DEI hire, right? Because they are focused on the very underpinnings that make an organization work. Now, if you're thinking about the redefinition of that, are you for or against changing it from DEI to something else? The other part of it I heard, and that's for you, the other part of it I heard is that DEI practitioners have to be sort of, you got to have a Swiss Army knife. You have to be able to do multiple types of jobs to be able to be effective in the type of work that you do. So give us more insight, and Chanang, I'll go to you first because we talked about the idea of should we change the name from DEI to something else?
Oh boy, this is always an interesting. I've vacillated over this answer many times, and I've landed in a place like I'm not changing my title. It is too long, but we couldn't figure out anything else. So, but it's not changing. Like this work is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You could be a belonging officer, a people officer, happiness. I've seen chief happiness officers, chief heart officers. I'm like, I love that. I want all those titles. That's great. It doesn't matter what the title is. The work is still a work. And I think when you start to change the titles in response to fear or in response to opposition, that's when there's a problem. I always say this, I'm like, the CFO has been called the CFO for how long now? Period. That's it. And so I think in that, I'd say the and is that, again, the work evolves and you have to change, you have to evolve with the work. We talk a lot about being on the defensive. And in this work, even the conversation and the title is, in the anti-DEI world or backlash or how do we defend it? But we really have to move to an offensive position in order to be sustainable. And that's what you all are doing in the business every day. Instead of responding to fires, tackling fires, how do we create strategies, programs, policies that are sustainable and forward-facing and future-facing? And that's the approach we've taken with our strategy and our vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm not calling it an acronym that might change and it's DEBA in one country or EDI in another country. We have rebranded all of our work so that every single person across the organization can speak to it. They can explain what it is. They know what the pillars are. They know what the priorities are. It's called RISE, and everybody in the organization knows what that is.
Tope, I see you pulling up the mic.
I think, so I'm on the bipolar end to this. I think D&I is the function, right? It's the business unit, if you want to call it that. And I think there are players within it. So, for us and for me and for the team, how do you make sure that this is a business unit that isn't tied to a non-billable unit? How do you change the mindset and framing of your team so that they are received better by the business so that they can then engage them in the work? So every single person within my team has an innovation and operations title because that's who we are. We're innovators. We're disruptors, but we're innovators. And we're also operational. So to the point you made earlier is, yes, CEOs should have all these different functions. Most CEOs have these functions. They can operate as an operations person, a finance person, a business person. But if we bucket ourselves into the classic example of what a D&I title is, we almost lose sight of what the role is doing. And the role is doing more than the business allows us to say because it has this title. So for us, D&I is the team, it's the function, but we're innovators who are partnering with our clients who are on business meetings and client meetings, and we're adding value. We're bringing in revenue indirectly, but you're going to know we're doing that because we're partnering with the business, right? So for us, it's like, I love the D&I title, and I think it should forever stay because that's what it is. What we do inside of that is what matters.
I think you're both right, but I want to say the underlying thing, right? How many people actually have to discuss their title in terms and how effective they're perceived? And I think that's the bigger problem, right? The fact that we even have to, and I felt that way, that because I'm coming into a meeting, I am I believe myself to be a very strong strategist. I believe myself to be very creatively in tuned. I believe myself to be of this industry. Yet when I walked into meetings about clients, about finance, about anything, I often had to question my value just based on my title. And it didn't matter that I've done great work. It doesn't matter that I have great partnerships that I bring to the table and great influence. But I have to question that because my title on the invite says this, I am going to be received. And that, to me, reflects more on the industry and the people at that table who, and there were many, who will dismiss you, no matter how brilliant you are and how long you've been in this business and what you've done, they will dismiss you because of your title. And then now we gotta work 4 times as hard because forget that I'm a woman of color, I'm also a DEI person, and I gotta sit here with y'all, and it's probably early in the morning, so like, you're stressed out and struggling anyway. And so I appreciate the question because, Adrianne, and I've seen you have to deal with this as well. There's so many, there are not that many people. I think there are more people in this room that agree with what we're saying than don't. But there's so many people that you guys are gonna go back to and sit at tables or sit on Zooms with that those are the folks that need to be challenged about whether or not the title should be changed. Not us, we're doing the work regardless.
Could I add to that really quick? Because I think part of what you're saying too, Kai, is like the expectation and the understanding of our roles is either not clearly defined and definitely not well understood and undervalued in general, I would say, across the industry and many industries. So we have to do a lot of work to then explain it and over-explain it, and that's exhausting.
So I
And-
challenge
and
this.
not
I
understood.
don't think that it is misunderstood. I think that there is something else that's wanted. I think that DEI often gets equated with being the happy person that brings happy hours to the business as opposed to doing the work of changing the culture of the business that you are running. You see what I'm saying?
And
I do see
And
what
I
you're
agree.
saying.
And I think every business has a different requirement for every D&I leader.
This is true.
Right?
and that's part of the challenge.
And that is
Yes.
part of the challenge, right? So some days you want us to be operational, some days you want us to be strategic,
Some days you just want me to make people smile, and I don't have time.
which you do really well. And I think that becomes the bigger challenge because how do you transfer the role of a D&I person when the requirements change every single day?
And I think that depends on industry, that depends on organization. So you're almost a chameleon in a way to be able to adapt. And when it is about that human connection business, you're able to do that. So we are very effective leaders as it relates to that. We also talked about, one of you mentioned about the business and financial imperative and how do we make this more billable work. One of the exciting things that happened, the organization I work with is FleishmanHillard. We have a business practice about DEI that we call Mosaic that literally has client billable opportunities for us to sell the work of DEI because it is sellable work. And does that sound like a commercial for FleishmanHillard? True Mosaic, please. No. But it's what's real, right? Because this business has value, and so much so that there are opportunities for what we talk about diversity supplier work, right? How many of you have programs, and what are your thoughts, and ultimately, how do we make these diversity supplier opportunities work, especially when we're coming under attack of if we're setting aside or creating opportunities for minority-owned businesses? What's that perfect formula to get these supplier diversity programs to work right?
Intention, I think, is the first aspect. And so I can speak about it from working on the inside as an inclusion lead and also on the outside now of being what would be constituted as a vendor or a partner for those of you that use the, we don't work with vendors, we work with partners line, right? And so on the inside, intention is key. On the inside, intention is key. You have to want to work with people that you haven't worked with before. That is very difficult when you are up against time, money, diligence, relationship, all of these things. I get it. But the concept of being intentional so that you have a more diverse pool to pick to choose from, so that you do get more excellent work, so that you do get better rates, so that you do get all of these benefits to having a diverse pipeline of suppliers is real. Some people think, oh, we have to build a whole new system. For others, it's as easy as, here's the list of people that I know that are MWBE certified, that are, they may not be certified, but it is owned by somebody who identifies within one of the diversity categories that we acknowledge within the organization. It really is as simple as that. And then, of course, working with finance and procurement to make sure that everybody's set up in the system and they get paid equitably and all of those things. On the outside, what I am finding is the partnership. And it's the people that want to lean into growing business. I think when we talk about supplier diversity, we don't talk about that economic empowerment space where it's like you are literally giving people an opportunity to build their livelihoods, to build generational wealth, to build themselves as professionals. And so for all of those folks who have leaned into working with Valerie Agency and our cultural strategy work that we've been doing and creative execution, I thank you, because some people will give you the runaround that like, oh, we have to go through this huge process and all of these things, and large companies have that. Some of them that are sponsoring today, I get that. But if you would at least put somebody on the list or bring someone in for a CAPES presentation or bring someone to the table to introduce to your media person, your production person, your creative person, your whomever, your operations person, that is what's necessary to keep it going. It doesn't have to be a big, complex challenge. It just has to be intentional.
Thank you. So me and Kai have worked together on a lot of supply
Several times,
unfortunately, on a lot of supply diversity metrics, implementation. And the thing I've learned is for businesses, it's all about storytelling. If you're in a creative space, you have to tell the story of how you invested or you partnered with a minority-owned business and the success metric that comes from it. It's an economic circle, right? So, an example I always like to give is at Ogilvy, I went out and we went and found a minority-owned company called Sata Studio, again, intentionally naming people. We went and found them. We negotiated. We didn't lowball them because that's not what we do to minority-owned businesses. They've worked with us for the last year and produced some of the best work we've ever seen. So now what happens is when I'm impressed, I talk about it. When there's articles, I talk about it. So those are like the practical little steps you can take to bring in minority suppliers. And now they shoot Nike, Vogue, the list goes on, right? Giving that one company an opportunity. Mind you, they were shooting bigger companies before us, right? But we didn't have access to them. We found the access, we made sure the barrier into the business wasn't hard, and then we propelled, we excelled, and we consistently promoted. That's how easy it is to shift that $1 million budget to $100 million into the minority-owned suppliers, right? So a lot of businesses don't even have KPIs. We have KPIs. At minimum, you spend $1 billion for most of our industries on advertising, media, and spending. How much of that's going to a minority-owned supplier? Well, it's on us as leaders and leaders in the room, keep a percentage for minority-owned businesses. At Ogilvy, I'm like 10% at minimum is our KPI. And every year, I hold every single person accountable to that 10%. But 10% can change someone's life. That's economic growth. That's a future for someone's mom. That's dental care, health care, all the things. And that's the storytelling element, right? You tell the story of how impact is what you have done and you have driven to change the next generation to come.
So what if we don't, Channing? What are the risks of not creating these opportunities for supplier diversity?
I mean, I don't know how we can't in an industry like ours. And as I was thinking about this question, we saw, we all were using the term like supply chain issues during the pandemic and shortages. We have seen all of these organizations who put so much investment into one or two really large brands or suppliers. We would never put all of our investment in one place. It's not a very good strategy. You wouldn't invest all your money into one portfolio or into one fund. That's not a successful strategy. So why would we do that in our vendor strategy as well? And I don't think every vendor is a partner. Actually, I think that's like a false, that sounds nice, but not every supplier. Some suppliers are suppliers, some are transactional, some are vendors, some of our partners, some amplify our business. They help us grow. right? And some partners, we are helping them grow. And I think the miss, one, I mean, it's a loss of a business opportunity because frankly, if we didn't do any of this, the clients are asking for it. So at the end of the day, they are demanding that you're able to show them that you have established relationships with Black-owned, women-owned, disabled-owned, veteran-owned, Latinx-owned, Asian-owned, whatever it is, across many different disciplines, not just media, not just creative. And I think it's disappointing when we don't have, at this day and age, if you don't even have those relationships. And so I think it doesn't stop there. It's like, okay, that's an opportunity for us when we think about adding value to the business, is to create some of those relationships for the business and share them, hand them off, and be very clear and explicit about the value that those organizations add. And it may not solve all of your challenges. I think we often want a one-stop shop. We have this one vendor that does this one thing and it fixes 1,000 problems. That might not be the case for a new strategy. Maybe you have 5 and it addresses several different challenges and also across multiple clients. So I think we're really missing out on opportunities for new business models, to reach new customers, to think differently, to think faster. The same approach we take with emerging technology, what we're seeing, what's happening across the business, is the same way we should think about how we bring in others into creative models, whether it's the gig economy, whatever way of working people are leaning into, we need to adapt so that we can capitalize on that, or we'll be behind.
And some of the best work that we've seen has come from the culture.
Well, yes.
Just some?
Yeah, like,
Oh,
well,
I didn't want to say
most.
oh. I didn't want to say
It's Blackweek. Just some?
Wow. A lot of the work we've seen has come from the culture. And I think to Shanning's point, it's telling the business that. It's letting them know that, hey, that ad you loved so much, guess who was behind it? This is the team. This is what the team looks like that created that epic Super Bowl ad that you love so much, right? Telling that story is going to unlock the business impact, and it's also going to keep D&I rooted in the business because we're adding value.
And hold them accountable. Have the leadership tell you, like you said, you have to build in the KPIs. If you don't, they're not going to do it. You have to hold them responsible, not just for a dollar spend or a percentage spend, but tell us who it is that you partnered with. Who were they? How did you engage? And have they been satisfied, right? What are the results, right? What are the scores around their engagement with you? Because what we're not going to do is engage with all of these diverse-owned partners, and then we don't treat them well. And then we don't hold our end of the bargain as it relates to our values. We don't pay them for 180 days. That's unacceptable. So it is a two-way street, and I don't think that we've really evolved to that place consistently yet, and I'm hoping that's where we can get to.
You mentioned we haven't evolved to that space, in that place yet. There's in November, something coming up really big, which, essentially, depending on which way the election will go, and I hope everyone is voting and registered to vote. Please vote early if you can. But how are you prepared for what the possibilities could be, and how do you remain 10 toes down, in this work that we're doing, in spite of what some of a possibility could be?
It's almost like Groundhog's Day, right? Like, low-key, we've been to, like, the first level of that video game. We saw what it could be. And for me, particularly as someone who is embedding inclusion work into my version of strategy and creativity, that is the work. That will always be the work, right? That, to me, is the evolution. I think, there was a reason why the term DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of a sudden became a bad word. And for me, that was because it was working, right? Like, I've been told before I'm intimidating, and I'm like, well, there's a good side to that, because that must mean that there's something wrong with you, right? So like, right? So like, if what we're saying is like this thing that we've been working hard to do to make the world's business, economics, everything better for a broader world, a broader group of people. On the tech side, my team used to tell me, you have to solve for the fringe, right? We have to solve bugs for the fringe, for the folks on the outside. That way, everybody has a better experience overall. That means that more people want it. That means that if we have to go as far as like banning certain books, like like I like my hair from schools, if we have to go as far as, we can't do any programming in the workplace because we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, that means that must be a lot of people that you are making feel comfortable. Yeah. And so for me, for those of you that are okay with confrontation, because I recognize not everybody is, that is not for everyone, and there's a role for you if confrontation is not your thing. But for those of us that are okay to take challenges head on, this is our time. Right? Because whichever direction that the election goes, there will be conversation. There will be a need for those of us in the marketing space, whatever side of marketing you're on. There will be a need for toolkits. There will be a need for conversation. There will be crisis comms needed regardless of what happens. There will be a need to unfortunately justify why we need more people who look like the people on this stage right now in creative, front of screen, back of camera, all of these things. And that just means that it's ripe timing for us to get our money, that's first of all, and then second of all, make an impactful change. And so I wouldn't shy away from it. You can't be scared of everything, and I think that like the minute people start to buck up on you, that's when you close your fists and you charge forward, and that's what we're doing with DEI work.
I thought that was, well said. I was sitting kind of in a trance at the question of like, are you scared about, and I just thought of an outcome. And then I thought, wow, I'm really hoping that that's not, like, it changes the trajectory of my job, right? Because to your point, when I look at what is our role, because we have to be, again, very aware of who it is that we're serving and what it is that we're doing. And what I have found kind of in New York, I'm newer to New York, but we live in, this is almost like a bubble if you live here. And then in the industry, it's another bubble within that bubble. And we can often kind of fall into this group think where you think everyone thinks the same way and likes the same things and votes the same way.
I live in Long Island. We do not all vote the same way.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. It's a good point.
Come to LA.
I know. And I'm from DC, so like I'm like, ooh, this is different. So I think it is our duty and our role to prepare our organizations, no matter whether it is local, state, federal, changes, policies, elections, rules, on first and foremost, what are the business impacts of some of these changes? And we would be remiss to think that there will not be business impacts no matter what what happens in November. There are impacts to the way that we are taxed, to the way that to the benefits options that we have, to whether you can have gender neutral bathrooms and depending on the state entities in which your businesses run and operate. And this is the level of rigor and sophistication that the women on this stage do their jobs, right? And I think that again speaks to the level of insight and strategy that is required to advise and guide the business. So I think that first and foremost is a part of what we are called to do. I think the other part is that, again, no matter what happens, there will be people that will be elated and there will be people that will be devastated. And it is very easy to then spend the next quarter or two being a therapist for the organization, right? And we have also seen that. And this is across generation. I know we try to act like Gen Z, we gotta be therapists to Gen Z. It's not just Gen Z, because I have a fair number of men over 50 that are in my office quite often trying to understand and navigate the nuances of unlearning things that they have been taught their entire lives.
Yep.
And after this election, there will be more unlearning, whether you are taking the direction and accepting that the most powerful person in the world, I was gonna say something else, is,
you want me
I'm
to
sorry,
say it?
Well, I don't know what we're allowed to say. I don't know.
I say whatever I want.
Well, the most powerful...
We have to wrap them up, obviously.
That the most powerful woman in the world, is a woman, or whether the most powerful person in the world doesn't think that you should have the right to speak or think. Yeah. So, we have a charge ahead of us no matter what happens.
Yeah. So, we're gonna wrap because she's giving me the finger, not the finger, but this.
I saw
It was a swirling finger. So, but Tope, you did bring up something that was really important. You talked about the communication and storytelling around it. So I'm just going to offer a story for you to tell when you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and the importance of this work. Really quick. Everyone has walked down the sidewalk, right? I can't see if you're raising your hand, but I know you have. But on the sidewalk, there's a lower curbed area. You've seen it, yes? The lower curbed area was actually not created for white cisgender men who were abled walking. It was created for people with a disability, people in wheelchairs, right? So everyone in this room has benefited from something that was created for the community with a disability. If you have a baby, you've pushed that baby on the curb with your stroller. If you have groceries in New York City, you've pushed your grocery cart on the curb. You have ridden your bike on the curb. What the system, or somebody is saying right now, is to raise the curb so no one has access. So we have to push back and tell the story and think about that lower curbed area. When we think about the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was created to support the least of these. And when we create a system that supports the least of these, we create a system that supports all of us. So thank you so much for
Thank you, everyone.
this panel.
Thank you,
Tope, Channing, Kai, we appreciate you. And don't believe the hype.
DEI will never die.
All right, thank you.